You know, the oyster is very important to the Chesapeake Bay. Chesapeake Bay, being the largest estuary in the United States, provides a lot of recreational as well as commercial activity. The Chesapeake Bay used to be the producer of oysters in the United States.
The oyster industry here in Maryland in the Chesapeake Bay, how much we relied on it. It was a focus of the country. Everybody thought of the Chesapeake oyster as being the premier oyster. It was the envy of the entire world when it came to raw edible seafood. With its collapse nearly 50 years ago, it put a tremendous strain on the industry itself.
The current state of the oyster population is really very, very small. The decline of the oysters is related to a couple things, some of them controllable and some of them not. Historically, over-harvesting, you know, at the turn of the century, back in the 1900s, they were just taken out at volumes that really were not sustainable, and that started the decline. In the 50s, there was some natural bacterial infections, disease that came in, so it's really a combination of things.
The decline of the oyster meant that we lost a large amount of our watermen that were harvesting oysters. We lost a lot of our packing houses.
It's critical that for my family, as they grow up, they have a clean and safe environment to get out and enjoy the waterways as I did when I was a kid. But also as a business owner who sells seafood, it's critically important to me that we have, you know, great healthy seafood coming locally from sources and that the economy stays strong. The Chesapeake Bay is a major economic driver in the state of Maryland and creates thousands of jobs. And if we don't maintain the health of the bay, those jobs are going to disappear.
In 1993, then Secretary of Natural Resources, Dr. Tory Brown, looked at Maryland's oyster populations and realized we were in crisis. Those populations had declined to a very alarmingly low level. And he came up with the idea of getting a wide-ranging group of people who had experience with oysters, putting us together and coming up with a plan that thought outside the box. That's his term.
What Tory Brown wanted to do in 1993 was to bring those different parties together so that there was only one objective, and that was the oyster. And the only way to do that was to bring everybody at the table. But there always is going to be, you know, somewhat competing entities.
There were environmentalists, there were politicians, there were scientists, there were aquaculturists, a whole range of people, that the oyster populations were in such crisis that everybody wanted to come up with a solution. And that's what we did. That's also where the Oyster Recovery Partnership was created.
Through the efforts of the Oyster Recovery Partnership and its partners over the last decade, as the capacity has increased and capabilities have increased, I think you've seen an overall momentum, not only within the federal and state agencies and with the scientific community, but also the public at large.
We've had an eclectic board of different interests: environmental, aquaculture, watermen, others. We got the right people in the room, and we always wanted to get it right. There was no politics, no agendas. It was just, can we physically produce oysters and actually begin restoring the bay?
How I envision ORP, it's like this amazing facilitator. They are able to take federal, state, private industry and put them in the same room and make things work out together. And that's kind of the progress. I don't think at any point right now we would be at the state we are in aquaculture, you know, how much it's grown if it wasn't for ORP.
It plays a very unique role. There isn't any other organization like it out there. And it involves citizens, it involves businesses, it involves government, it involves everybody that cares about the bay and it cares about oysters. And that role is very, very important. Without ORP, I really doubt whether we're going to see a restored oyster population, at least in my lifetime.
What they're doing today, starting with planting, I'm sure, thousands of oysters in the beginning to literally millions of oysters today, every year, it has the potential of really restoring, and I've seen on film how it's restored the bay down in the water and how it's really making a difference.
We need to put more oysters out there that spawn and produce larvae to produce the spat. We need to have more oysters out there on the bottom to do the ecological services that they do, cleaning the water and providing habitat and food for other organisms.
Oysters are extremely important to the Chesapeake Bay's ecosystem. Not only do they filter the bay's water, and one oyster will filter up to 30 to 50 gallons of water a day, but they also provide valuable ecosystem services in that they provide habitat for much of the marine life that live in and around the bay.
This past year I saw more bay grasses than I've seen since '72 when they all disappeared. We're actually doing better. The water is actually clearer than it was back in the '70s.
We're really working on now is getting better and better scientific evaluation of how to place these oysters, where they'll have the best chance of survival, where we can benefit everybody as much as possible. We want to help the commercial watermen. We want to have oysters on natural oyster bars. We want to help the aquaculturists get the young oysters that they need so that they can produce them for their customers. We want to help the environment by putting oysters where they'll just be there to environmentally help the water by filtering the water, creating better water quality and that sort of thing.
What are we seeing as a result of these efforts? It's coming down to the fact that oysters are extremely popular. They're making a comeback within the restaurant industry. Many of these programs that Oyster Recovery Partnership and its coalition of partners have been working towards are supporting this overall drive. Much of the capacity that we've built over the years and the knowledge that we've built over the years are going to come into play now to produce a highly profitable oyster that's going to satisfy the demand not only here locally but also on a nationwide basis.
It's important for ORP to carry out its mission because the objective is reestablishing the oyster population. It's got to be our mission to continue to bring these parties together and make sure we're focused on the number one goal, and that is the oysters.